So, do you want to write a book?
I think that's how it started. I like to write, obviously, and I think after Dancing Mindfulness was written, I was brainstorming about what's the next thing I would really want to write about, and it's mystified me. As many great books as there are out there about EMDR, nobody's directly tackled this yet. So we have EMDR with this community, EMDR with this community, with this community, and they're fabulous books that I think expand learning, but with as huge as mindfulness has gotten in the clinical fields, kind of like, why hasn't anybody written this yet? And so much of my experience has been when I ask myself that question, that's the universe's way of telling me, well, you have to write it. So, and when I thought about doing the book on EMDR and mindfulness, it's a lot for me to want to work as a co-author with someone because I'm a pretty driven, self-dependent person. But I knew I couldn't have written the book I want to write unless you were writing it. Because of, I always say you're like, you're Buddhist mindfulness and I have more of the secular approach to it, because my whole thing is I never had the desire to become a Buddhist. And I mean, I think you're integrated spiritual wise, but you would identify more as a Buddhist. But I think that our perspectives there, that listen, you don't have to be a Buddhist to do this, but because you have so much of that rich history and training, I just think your perspective, plus obviously our shared goals with trauma work, EMDR work, and trauma, it just will make for a great collaborative volume.
And I feel like the book is another natural outgrowth of us getting back together and forming a band.
Sure.
You know, it's sort of
Rock and roll.
and in keeping with what you were just saying about the two approaches, or sort of what we each bring to the table, it's kind of like what we bring to the table is really showing people, we're able to show people that mindfulness is not just a technique, but it's an integrative approach, and that we're going to be integrating, you know, thousands of years of wisdom and practice, which includes the older, you know, ancient wisdom and the more modern wisdom and everything in between. And then with the EMDR therapy, it's the same thing. But, many of the books that you mentioned at this point, you know, especially in the history of EMDR now, realize that EMDR is more than a technique. But there's still a lot of people in the mainstream that don't understand that, or perhaps new EMDR therapists who may not know that. I couldn't write the book that I would want to write without being co-authored by me. And I like to write too, but I'm like Kafka. I write and then I shove it in a drawer. So this one, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to email you all my contributions.
All right. And I'll remind you to do that.
And if you want to shove them in a drawer, that's your business. But
Well, I think another thing we should talk about is this fascinating thing that we both taught English. So I taught English in Bosnia and Herzegovina for 3 years after the war. One of my undergraduate degrees is in American Studies, Pop Culture, which was part of English. And I'm fascinated by words and language and pop culture concepts, and you taught English in a high school setting. Then I also taught speech and debate, which is part of English as well in high school.
yeah, and I came to teaching through, when I got sober 27 years ago, about 9 months in or so, I went to vocational rehab. It's a program
To rehab you vocationally.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's in New York State. It's been there since the 70s, and it's keeping on going. It's called Employment Program for Recovering Alcoholics. Originally, and I think still, funded by the Smithers Foundation.
I always love that name.
Smithers.
Smithers.
Well, there's many reasons to like that name.
Okay.
And but also it goes through New York State. Anyway, point being, I came out a high school English teacher after like 6 weeks of investigating what I might be, and then I got a job a few months later. And then here's the thing about the writing, though, especially. So I really bumped into a lot of cool things, ending up where I ended up. One of which was every 5 years, Lehman College, which is part of the City University of New York, sends in a team to provide master's level courses in writing across the curriculum for a group of teachers at a school. We became that school as my second year teacher.
Cool.
So I got 2 years of graduate level work at how to help my students apply writing to everything they were doing.
Yeah. The science of trauma is such a huge buzz thing. At these conferences, people bring up their brain slides, and the joke I always make is, I'm still much more of an artist than a scientist when it comes to understanding this. I mean, I don't devalue everything because I think the neurobiology that's been researched and discovered helps support a lot of the work we do. But I tend to have the attitude, that's nice, but I drive a car and I know how to navigate, but learning the mechanics of it's not my skill set to learn those things. But for me, the art of treating trauma has always been, that's my passion and that's my interest. And another reason I'm excited for writing this is I think it gets to show our artistic commitment to what treating trauma looks like, instead of just it's the science of mindfulness or the science of EMDR therapy.
Which I love too. That's the one place where we're not so yin and yang. We're kind of two artistic forces kind of rolling along.
Tortured former musicians. Well, we're still musicians in our own way.
We are. I like in our own way. I've heard you sing.
I am too. Trauma.
On Spotify.
On Spotify. He's on
stalking you
Spotify
on
too.
Spotify, huh?
His solo album on Spotify is fantastic. Not the punk stuff. Well, I mean,
It wasn't a punk record. That was
it's your singer-songwriter.
A good number of punk rockers from the late 70s, as they got older, and I'm not even saying like in their 40s or 50s, as they got older, started to sound more like Wilco or R.E.M. this or that. So I was just fitting in. What are you doing? Playing a clip?
Going on Spotify.
We're on Spotify.
Why else would I go on Spotify other than to hear Sensation Days? To quote the movie 28 Days, I mean, I'm misquoting it, but without humor, what's the frickin' point? I don't know. I mean, that's just been a big part of my recovery experience, that if you can't laugh in the face of life and what life brings you, I feel bad for people who can't do it. And that being said, of course I've gone through my periods where it feels like I can't find a lot of laughter, but I think a big part of our feature, both training-wise and writing-wise, is this idea of genuineness. Being your authentic self, obviously respecting boundaries that you have to have clinically, but not being afraid to show people your vulnerability. And for me, a big part of that is to show the way that humor has helped me to heal. Now, have I used it to deflect? Of course, we all have. And I have to call myself out in those situations. But to me, I think humor and genuineness go hand in hand if we're talking intervention.
And I feel like, so I was raised to laugh, and I was raised to appreciate comedy by my father. And that's never ended. And then when I started to do education and training, I noticed that it's very helpful. And then I noticed in watching others and maybe making a mistake here and there, I could see how tender an area it is. Like you're saying about how sometimes I may not be able to find the laughter. I have to kind of monitor myself around, who's getting the laugh, whose expense might that be.
It's a nice way to
so
look at
usually
it.
It's at my expense, which keeps it real. But also, and now I live in the Highland Park area of Los Angeles, and I spend a lot of my time, as you know, with Mark Maron, and I end up having coffee more than once with Maria Bamford and a bunch of other comedians. So I just get new material all the time from the pros, and I get to have my own laugh. As opposed to delivering.
Your name dropping will only impress me when I can meet John Oliver through Mark Maron. That's like my 1 degree connection. I love John Oliver. He's my...
How do you not?
I was playing with tennis with John Oliver while golfing at the same time, and we were discussing trauma, and I brought your name up. I dropped your name. I've never met him.
I think humor is a feature of our trainings. I don't know, because you've seen me do the full training with EMDR, because it is such an exhaustive, to fit what you're expected to train in 2-3 day models is, I don't think it's human, but it's the way we have to do it to make sure people minimize their time off but still meet their requirements. And not only are teaching mindfulness skills throughout the training a big part of our curriculum in terms of helping promote self-care, but we do try to keep it light, because that's something I hope I can continue to grow in as a trainer is, yes, this is serious stuff we're talking about, but if we can't laugh with each other and support each other as clinicians in that joy and laughter, what are we going to end up as? A bunch of miserable, burnt out people who don't want to do this anymore.
And I've never gotten an evaluation where it said you were too funny. I often get evaluations that say the humor helped it a lot. And helped
You're
me to
a
learn.
cheeky bastard. Stop.
Didn't get that one. But if John Oliver came to my training, that might be his response. And then you'd be mad at me for ruining the relationship with John Oliver by messing up the training.